Starfield is with 6 million players in its first week, Bethesda's biggest game launch ever, and finally the space adventure we can lose ourselves in as we did in Skyrim. Or did Starfield took an arrow in its knee? Skyrim in space. The words with which Bethesda's game director Todd Howard described their newest entry. And if we look at the flood of positive critic reviews with praises like "this is beyond what we've come to know an open world to be," or "Starfield has what it takes to be another Skyrim level game that's played religiously for the next decade," it seems that we are up to go full no life on Starfield. That's until we check on the actual player reviews, which are at 77%, not necessarily bad, but nowhere near Skyrim's 95%. Starfield has one massive core problem, and it's in almost every single aspect of the game. For some context, let's compare the two games. I'll try to keep this as spoiler-free as possible. The story in Starfield is, except for some weak points, very well made. The background lore, which you can let an UC Vanguard presentation explain to yourself, is full of wars, treachery, fanatics and crazy bulked alien invasions, and give you an idea what the ideals and motives of the three main factions of the game are. The relationships between these are the core aspect of Starfield's world. Being full of details and a lot of characters, it can really shine. The Constellation, a group you are joining at the beginning of the game and which will lead you through the main story, is unfortunately not as well designed. Most members haven't really achieved anything in their time before you joined them, even though they seem to exist for decades.
You'll be solving that puzzle now.
And frankly, this whole family thing is just complete nonsense. I mean, I get it. A place and group to feel at home in a game is a really good thing to make you emotionally attached. But for God's sake, stop shoving it into my face so much. You are barely 1 hour into the game, meet them for the first time after coming back with a ship that belongs to one of their members, which you left behind, and the first thing they say to you,
"You were one of us."
Besides that, there's also some minor and bigger groups and organizations you can work and quest for, and tons of little side stories, of which the bigger part is well written. Compare that to Skyrim, which also has a lot of little side stories, factions and kingdoms at war, different organizations and groups, as well as an insane background lore, which would be unfair to count, since Skyrim is still Elder Scrolls 5 and therefore has a lot more background story to draw from. Starfield still wins here. The relationship between the characters are just way more nuanced. The bigger story is straight up more interesting and better presented, but unfortunately, all that is part of the big problem. Bethesda has never been known for the best combat, but Starfield is definitely one of their worst. While shooting, aiming and hitting is as smooth as clean as never before, it can't keep up with any successful shooter. Which before has never been a problem, since the strength always was in a vast option of unique weapons, or spells that is. The weapons in Starfield are as generic as they can be. Some different machine guns, shotguns, pistols and such, in different rarity and with different perks, but after 5 to 10 hours of gameplay, you have essentially seen every single weapon in the game. No portable ship cannons and no epic snowstorm. And while there's some kind of voodoo power you can acquire, the cast time on these is so slow compared to the fast-paced gunplay that it just kills the flow. Plus, there's no lightning you can shoot out of your hands, which is just sad. The character progression is almost the same as in every other RPG. You level up by getting XP from quests and enemies, and after each level you can put a point in your talent tree, where you can level up each trait 4 times. Pretty much like Skyrim's Constellation tree. The only difference is that before each increase of a trait, you have to do a special challenge to kind of train that trait first, which makes sense. I mean, in real life you also have to train the skill like standing before you get better at it. Unfortunately, that little extra is only annoying and adds really nothing but some realism. For example, I didn't do much space fights in the first 30 hours of the game. but got a nice ship with lots of space as a quest reward. Now, I couldn't use it because apparently you need a high piloting skill to use the good ships. So I was locked out of that until I spent enough time space fighting, which I didn't even really want to do. We can now start to see the pattern of where the problem lies within this game. Now, the atmosphere of the game is just top notch. The music, the sound effects, the different settlements and cities on planets really make you feel like you're in there, and is miles ahead of anything in Skyrim. You really get the space feeling while playing. That is, if you don't look at the residents living there, which are impressively enough more unrealistic than those of the 12-year-old Skyrim, where NPCs actually just do their own stuff and have semi-realistic moving. If Starfield's NPCs would start talking gibberish, they could literally be out of Sims, where the face has way too much motion and the body has next to none. They're like goddamn zombies. At least the physics are far better than in Skyrim, even though you can't really do much interesting with it, except for launching cheese into space. It's really a shame. If they added some items to play around with that, like in Just Cause 4, this could have easily been the best feature of the game. Now, I can't compare any Starships gameplay to Skyrim, but I really don't have to, since the space fights are straight up one of the worst I ever experienced in a game. The ships just steer like the first car that got ever invented, where you had no power steering and had to use brute force, which by the handling speed of these ships I believe Barrett is doing in the back each time you press a button to turn. You also have 3 different weapon types, each one has its own pros and cons. 6 different ship systems where you can transfer energy from one to the other mid-fight to power some stuff up, which nobody that plays Bethesda games is able or even willing to micromanage. And while it's cool that you can assign crew members with different perks to boost specific areas of your ship, all that realism just absolutely kills the actual fun while playing. Exploring, the heart of every Bethesda game. Starfield has a vast universe with 1,000 planets that you can fully discover, with countless structures to check out on each single planet. No way Skyrim can win here, right?
Hey, you.
Except that Skyrim's exploring experience mops the goddamn floor with Starfield. While there's a massive universe to explore, there's almost nothing of actual interest to find. The buildings all look the same, 95% of all enemies are bob in different colors, and unique loot is next to non-existent. While you couldn't walk 50 meters in Skyrim without finding something interesting, in Starfield you partially walk 10 minutes without finding anything. The scanning system they straight up copied from No Man's Sky, but made it worse, which is impressive in itself, is just straight up boring. While a massive universe to explore sound nice, it's worth nothing if it's empty, which No Man's Sky has proven years ago with one of gaming's biggest flops in history. In Skyrim, you rarely have any downtime. You're doing something, finding something, fighting something, and most importantly, get cool stuff. Bethesda, in their own words, made Starfield's planets deliberately bare to make you feel small, and because that's how space is. Even comparing Starfield gameplay to actually walking on the moon. But is this fun? Now, while you can up your experience with mods, that isn't really an argument, since for once, a game shouldn't rely on third-party software for being playable, and secondly, we compare both games vanilla here, and Skyrim absolutely was fun without any additions to it. All in all, Starfield is the most shallow game Bethesda has ever released. There's epic scenes and lights, a massive but empty world, and a quadrillion different NPCs who effectively make the game a visual novel. Except that your actions don't change anything. Which brings us to the roots of the problem. The one thing Bethesda failed in their newest IP. Late over food. It's the same as buying the most expensive designer porcelain plate and putting a basic McDonald's hamburger on it. Not even a goddamn cheeseburger. It's caring more about what the game looks like from an outside perspective than what's actually inside. It's putting your own artistic fulfillment of creating a believable human inhabited space before the actual consumer's best interest. Skyrim may be janky, sometimes ugly looking and not really realistic, but it's fun. I'm just having a blast exploring spaces, finding a new cool axe and quest item you literally don't know what it's for, and killing a dragon on your way to the next cave, dumping all those sweet dragon bones onto Lydia. If you enjoy sinking yourself into Bethesda's new work, I'm happy the wait was worth it for you. I just think that their own goal of making a Skyrim in space would have been achieved if they sticked onto the values that made Skyrim such a hit in the first place. And because I believe most bugs make these games better, not worse, here's some of the best ones I encountered. That would have been a nice ending for the video if I hadn't messed up my settings and all my recordings would be running like a Mac trying to run Cyberpunk. So instead you get this beautiful picture of a schnitzel.